Okay, guys. Well, I thought I'd start a little different tonight because I had one of those wonderful experiences that every now and again you get. And somebody said, "Oh, I had a horrible report the other day that I read," and I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, share it with me," and they did. And so I thought I might like to share you. I'm not going to share you the report, but just sharing a few excerpts from it because I think. Again, we're all going to make mistakes. I certainly have made my fair share of them. So it's worthwhile seeing what that looks like. So I'm going to share, hopefully, an image in front of you. No, I've got no one.
Yep.
Yep.
We've got images.
Okay. This is a branch of a Gadaji, which is Crimbia torrelliana, that has fallen. And this is a security fence here. So you're getting an idea. That's probably what, 2 centimeters in diameter, 2.5 centimeters in diameter, something like that. Yep. You can have your mics on, guys, and say yay or no. I can't see you whilst I'm.
It's not very big.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Looks pretty small.
50 to 60 mil.
50 or 60 mils.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably more than 20.
Yeah, it could be getting. Well, what are one of these things here? These are about 25 by 25 square, aren't they?
Yep.
The uprights.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. So it's somewhere in that range, 25 to 50 mils. So first of all, that's the context. Trees dropped a branch. It's in a school, as you'll read. And then I found this right up the front, right in the first page. This report does not identify all structural defects of trees inspected, and no responsibility is accepted for faults not identified or predicted. Anyone got any comments about that first paragraph?
Sounds lazy.
It does, not all bad. But what they're saying is, if we miss something, we're not going to take any responsibility for what we've missed, which seems an odd position to say. And then what's prediction got to do with it? You don't predict faults, do you?
No.
You observe them. So it's an odd turn of phrase, and I just thought it was weird. Continues on, no responsibility for damage to persons or property is accepted by trees referred to in this report due to unforeseen or extreme environmental events. Well, that's fine. We don't expect him to. The client should rely on the contents of this report only to the extent that some structural faults have been observed, but not all. So he's saying, look, it's just this structural fault that I'm talking about and nothing else. And it should be noted that the risk associated with trees cannot be eliminated without eliminating the tree. Therefore, the aim of this report is to assist the client, assist the client to manage that risk. So that's just a cut and paste of the exact thing. And then this is from the text. Let me make it larger so you guys can read it. Is that easy enough to read?
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Okay. Trees in excellent health, good. Located in a highly visible area. What does that mean?
I assume that means it's in a highly occupied area of a school, but it's not really visible.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, it's an area. That's what he's trying to say. It's an area that's highly occupied, and where the tree, what's happening with that tree is fairly apparent. And the area is occupied for a few hours per day during the school term. So we've talked about this last time. An average school is about 15 or 16% use, and so we're talking about a third of that time. So 5% of the day that area is used, not necessarily the specific area where the branches drop, but that area generally is used. The tree has been allocated a moderate hazard rating. Now, what's the problem there? Anyone?
Well, firstly, what is moderate? And
Sorry, what was that?
What is moderate for a start?
Yeah, go on. Sorry, person doing it online, not Peter.
And the hazard rating should be risk.
Yeah. Who cares about a hazard rating? A hazard rating is what Matheny and Clark had come up with in the earlier days before we even really started to get our heads around risks. The tree industry had been left alone until essentially the 1990s. And then the initial thing was, well, let's rank our hazards because that's crazy. That's irrelevant. We need to rank our risks. So, yeah, this tree is in excellent health, as indicated by the masses of flower and woody seed pods on the end of the secondary branches. So the tree's in excellent health, flowering well. The weight of these flowers and seed pods combined with a recent dry period where the timber has dried out and is brittle is causing the summer branches with excessive seed and flower end weight to fail in the slightest breeze. Any comments on that?
How do you know
How do we know what?
that that's caused it,
Cause what?
the branch to fail?
Or the drying of the timber?
I was thinking about drying of the timber. That sounds pretty wild.
How does the timber dry out?
When the
Anyone?
tree when the tree's already in good health, you don't think
It's in good health. It's lots of water's flowing.
Yep.
To get to those fruit and flower, that's water's been moving up there. So how does the timber dry out?
Yeah, only if it's dying.
I don't know.
Maybe he was talking about the branch on the ground.
Well, again, it's not clear. And then we've had a branch fail. Remember, a branch.
I just
So that's
don't want this.
So he's extrapolating it out already. He's already saying, look, this tree's dropped a branch. It's definitely going to do the same thing again. Now, I don't want to be nasty, but Dominic, I can't see you there, but you can answer honestly. Have you ever got a speeding fine? Obviously, you
No, don't think so.
Oh, no, you haven't. Have you ever a motor vehicle infringement of any description?
try me.
How about you, Rob? Have you?
Just occasionally.
Just occasionally. Well, you've got to keep on doing it. It's never going to change.
Probably.
I'm in that category. I was one of those little boy racers that had to have the really fast, sleeper car. And I've got to tell you, I think in about a week's time, I get all 13 points. It's amazing. It's an absolute miracle. So just because it was a part of my life doesn't mean it's always going to be a part of my life. And I think that's something important to keep in mind. So extrapolating this out for the poor plant, very hard to do, not fair. So the target zone is a moderate occupancy zone. And I'm assuming because he's talked in the report or she's talked in the report, I'm not going to be generous either way, that they're talking about TRAC or the BTRA, Basic Tree Risk Assessment, taught by the TRAC qualification. So moderate occupation zone. What's moderate? Who has done TRAC? Anyone?
I have, but
Yeah,
I don't
I've done
do
track.
risk assessment.
Yeah, well, I'm just pulling up my notes and I don't see anything there that says moderate. So
I
again,
don't know off the top
see
of
how
my head.
the language is just flowing around loosely. There's a lack of precision. So if I had to try and audit this, and I didn't, fortunately, if I had to try auditing this, I would have said, look, this is ridiculous. I don't know what his occupation rate is. If he said his occupation was, if he's using BTRAs, are they be only constant, frequent, occasional, or rare? It's not frequent, because frequent would be, more than 10%, and we've already been told he's already given us stuff that says down at 5%. So I can't see that as being frequent. I think the school is used frequently, but not the area that he's talking about. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah.
We don't know because he's not telling us.
Yep.
And so this is what you've got to be careful of in your writing of a report, is not to get vague with your terms. And then here's where it gets really good. remedial pruning could be carried out to mitigate the risk, but the amount of pruning required to ensure no more branch failures will occur will leave the tree severely defoliated and in risk of going into decline. Where's the reality behind that? Why would you have to remove that much if it's just the end of the fruit? You could.
He clearly thinks he's going to remove all branches.
Yeah. It seems
Or
like
she.
a branch of that size, and yet he's telling us that the flower and the weight and all those things. I reckon I could go over that tree with a hedger, take half a meter off, and probably have most of that weight out, and still have a fair amount of vegetation left. I'm not suggesting
definitely.
that's what you should be doing to the tree, but I'm saying, why do I have to take so much weight out or so much foliage out that I'm going to stress the tree? Particularly, this is a Gadaji. It has a terminal inflorescence. That is, its flower is on the end, not back in behind. So we're not talking about big fruit behind. And so, in my professional opinion, our decision needs to be based around risk and harm mitigation. To remove the risk of constant branch failure, the tree should be removed to ground and the stump ground 300 millimeters below ground level with compensatory planting of more suitable species. Now, all of that is not particularly what you'd expect as a great report. Would we agree on that?
Yep.
One to
Yeah.
branch falling off
To
to removing the whole tree and grinding.
Yeah, so Peter said they've gone from a 50 mil branch falling off to removing the whole tree and grinding the stump, or replacing the tree with 3 other trees that in another 20 years' time we'll be getting close to it. I'll just save this so you can have it in the report. Report REPORT vlog. Now, I will stop sharing my screen and I'll open up the report because there's one other paragraph that I think just merits wonderful attention. And it was the one that made me almost stop in my tracks. So I will stop sharing so that I don't share the person's. I don't want to belittle anyone or anything else. The guy's done or the girl's done a job of trying to do a reasonable job. And, there are times when you're going to have to say, hey, this is not good, but this format here is not where we need to do that. So if I then go and open up, I will share you one more sentence from the report or one more area, and then I think you'll realize one of the common problems we have as arborists
What was the eucalyptus species of the report?
Corymbia torrelliana. It's a corymbia and with an adolescent leaf that's very hairy, and it has a massive flower set typically, and it cops a tanning for all sorts of things. It's been accused of causing problems with native bees, in spite of there being an absence of any research. They still cop it. They're being accused of being weed-like. Well, that's true, but then that's true of Corymbia citriodora, Corymbia maculata, lots of trees that produce high amounts of seed are accused of being in that situation.
Mark, under what circumstances did you get to see the report?
Another arborist had been asked to look at the tree, and he said, look, there's no problems with it. As a consultant, they got a second opinion, and then he got to see their report because he ended up going out and doing the removal. And Just, isn't it horrible? I'm just trying to find the exact paragraph and I am struggling to find it. Ah, yes. Okay. I'll save this for us and that'll just avoid. I just didn't want to have the person identified. Having fun. I just lost it again. I'm going crazy. Okay, that's why I'm going crazy. Okay, yep, I've got it. Thank you guys for being patient. This clause here is something that people often don't say. He's been really great or she's been really great. And again, I can't tell you whether it's male or female because I don't seriously know. I'll just close their report so there's no chance of you seeing who it was. Take all that fun away. But please, I mean, you see something like this, feel free to share it and welcome. We'll all learn from these sort of things. So here's the last paragraph, and I think it's great. The target zone is a moderate occupancy zone, occupied 2 hours a day at school. We've heard that already. However, the area can be densely occupied and as such, a highly visual area. Any further failures after risk mitigation shall be highly visible and reflect poorly on this author and other decision makers. What is the risk that they're managing?
Their own.
They're managing risk. This is a common thing that we see, a common theme we see in risk management and risk assessment.
Managing the risk to themselves.
Managing the risk to themselves, Peter says. It's called reputational risk management.
Yeah.
What happened to my reputation if I got this wrong? How would I deal with that? Now, in comparison, I need to stop sharing and then share all my screens. So do that. I'm sorry, I know it hates me doing this, but it's the easiest way for me to work. Okay, so there it goes. We've gone to the infinity screen. And we'll go to my send items. I just sent this across to Hugh Taylor. And this is a standard clause or 3 paragraphs from my standard report. The purpose of a true risk assessment is not to eliminate risk. Can you guys see that? I'll make it bigger for you.
Yep.
Is that better?
Yeah.
It's good.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. A risk assessment is about doing what's reasonably practicable to identify trees that pose a significantly elevated risk of harm and determining what actions can be reasonably and practically undertaken to mitigate that risk. The risk assessment then needs to communicate that information in a manner that the risk manager and other stakeholders can use. Trees that are retained and properly managed have some level of residual risk. This, by necessity, means that over time there'll be numerous near misses, periodic property damage, particularly associated with storm events, and on rare occasions, someone may be harmed. Trees are living organisms that always pose some level of risk by virtue of their size. It is inappropriate for risk mitigation measures to focus on eliminating or reducing risk that is already in the broadly accepted range. Doing so requires a disproportionate effort and expenditure and disregards the many benefits trees provide, including numerous health benefits. So that's a standard clause, and we actually started with that when we were first engaged to do tree risk assessments in schools, to tell the school before we even started, this is where we come from. We're coming from a position that, if you want to get rid of all risk, you've got to cut all trees down. Then you've got to cling wrap the kids' heads up. And when you realize you're stupid, you can rethink your position. It's just madness to think that people want to stop tree branches from falling. Why, Jeremy?
Because they don't understand. Well, most people don't understand what risk assessments are. They just want to stop. It's highly publicized. It's blown out of proportion, and people are gullible and believe what's fed to them from the media.
Yeah, and I don't blame the media either, because I can be on quote. The average journalist is innumerate. They're literate, but innumerate. They don't understand statistics. They don't understand science. And they do things like shoot people dead. Well, you can't shoot them live. You shoot and kill. I mean, they can't even get English right. So they can't get English right, which is their primary tool.
Their job.
Expect them to get maths right. So they don't understand, for example, the importance of a microburst in tree failures. That when they go out and you're not seeing big trees down everywhere, but highly localized, we're talking about a microburst event. And therefore, you shouldn't be extrapolating that across the city. Furthermore, if they knew that trees were only going to kill, 5 or 6 people a year, they're probably better off looking at other things that happen more often. Now, I'm not wanting to scare any of you, but this year, 365 people will be murdered or more in Australia. 5 are killed by trees. I mean, maybe they should talk about what to do to stop you getting murdered rather than worrying about trees. And the reason journalists do that is, well, most of them are a whole hamper short of a picnic. And there are a few that are bright, but the number of them just want sensationalism, and just want to make it sound great. It, unfortunately, affects us. So, yes.
Sensationalism sells, though, Mark, something that's safe and reasonable isn't exciting. So they don't worry about producing good news stories. It's always something bad that they're interested in.
Or
if it's not bad, they can make it bad.
Yeah,
but also,
go on, Jeremy. Has anyone lost Jeremy's voice?
Yeah, we've lost him.
Yep. I don't know what's happened, Jeremy. Turn your mic back on. You got a headset. Is it charged headset? The joys of technology.
Yeah, we've got gremlins this evening.
Yeah. It's probably all these people that want to wish Christmas greetings to people. Have you got a mic? No, you're not coming across till Jeremy. Yeah, no. Try logging out, logging back in again. See if that resolves it. So, look, yes, sensationalism sells, but I mean, I think honesty and scientific rigor are what we really want as a society. I want to understand the world around me, and that largely works on real things, not on hype and sensationalism. Otherwise, those social influences that are out there, on the OnlyFans and all those things, they would rule the country. They would rule the world. They don't. They just take money from innocent people. And, who here watches YouTube occasionally? Anyone? Yeah. You see those ads come across if you're one of those that don't pay to get rid of the ads. I do. And I look at them and I think, no, that wasn't invented by a Melbourne person. And no, it won't cool your house down in 2 minutes. And no, it won't run for 1 cent a decade. And no, that knife is not so sharp that it will never go blunt. And yes, that titanium saucepan is non-stick so long as you add lots of oil and keep it floating on the oil, just like you do on a stainless steel pan, because it is titanium over stainless steel and nothing else, you morons. And we're used to getting a whole pile of information on a regular basis as a society that is fundamentally flawed. And so that creates issues. And so when we're reporting to people, it's really important. If we want to express an opinion, we give some basis for that opinion. So, you know, the fact that he's worried about branches falling afterwards, it's acceptable. He's saying the real issue is what happens to my reputation. And I was asked that exact question in a matter that's going on in Sydney at the moment, a couple of trees, and the arborist on the other side sent me a text message and said, Mark, what would you say to the coroner if a branch falls off, kills somebody? And my answer to that very blunt question was, they're dead. You know, what else do you say? I inspected the tree. There was no branch that was different than any other branch. It was just a normal branch. And the benefits that trees provide means that we've got to have some element of risk. And it's funny, we seem to be afraid to do that. And so I would say probably 50% of the bad risk reports I read are really based on that question. If I say that's okay and something goes wrong, then what? Jeremy, can you speak? No, you've lost your microphone. It hates you. So in that situation, it's okay to understand that, but it's important just to follow the system. And if you follow the system, so he did a BTRA, and I've got a little cheat sheet that I use for BTRA. It's a little A5 one. And so we know that there's occasional use, and the likelihood of impact then would be occasional and full exposure low. And so if I go low and I put that into likelihood of failure, now he's saying probable, then I get unlikely. And if I add unlikely to the consequence, what would be the consequence of that 5 centimeter branch hitting somebody? What do you think?
It'd scare them.
It'd scare them, yeah. Maybe some stitches.
Yeah, like, I would say maybe a nurse or a doctor's visit. But
there may be, yeah,
definitely not hospital.
Medical attention or medical visit. On balances of averages, where do you think it fits? Because when we assess risk, one of the critical components is not to think about what could happen, but what is most likely to happen.
Very low.
Who
Probably
here
just bruises and some scratches.
Dominic, have you dropped a branch ever on a guy who's working below you, or been like me and got angry and thrown it at them?
I've thought about it.
You've got to do it. Well and truly worthwhile, therapeutic.
I do martial arts, so I do get to hit people on a regular basis. But I have had a branch dropped on me twice by the same person on the same job. But that just bounced off my helmet.
Yeah, so it hurts, it's unpleasant, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So I would say that the average is maybe a visit to the doctors and a couple of stitches. Let's put the value of that at, say, $1,000. Is that minor, significant, or severe? If severe is the loss of a life or $5 million, where does $1,000 sit?
Minor.
Significant or
Minor.
One of those.
Yeah, and I would say it's minor. You know, maybe $100,000 might be significant, maybe 50,000, but 1,000 is so close to the minor level in my mind that it's got to be close to that. But either way, doesn't matter what happens, when you add unlikely, you get low. So how do you follow the risk assessment that he cited? He would have given us all that information. He would have given us the things he said: occupation rate occasional, no protection. So if it now fits into the low category, I add that in. I look at the probability for, even if you wanted to go imminent, it still comes out somewhat likely. And for either negligible, minor, it's insignificant, and then significant, it would be a moderate risk. So in almost all scenarios, if he had followed the system, he couldn't have come up with any more than moderate, and in real terms probably should have been sitting at low. And so in real terms, now how many people?
Would a moderate risk justify the complete removal of the tree as he's recommended?
I don't think so. I don't know, because what's he not put a value on? Yeah, Rob, you got a question?
Well,
Michael?
Sorry, I wanted to go back to the fact that it appeared to me that the branch that failed had nothing to do with the fact that it had the weight of fruit on it.
Yeah, let me pull the image back up again. Yeah, there's a fair bit of fruit now at the end. It's not horrendous. But again, how many people were killed by the dropping of the branch? None. How many people hit? None. How many? Let me put it this way. I was thinking about this the other day as I was driving along. I've been looking at terrestrial lidar. Lidar is just using light to record things, bounce off. So terrestrial lidar, you can do wonderful things like find dead branches in trees. I reckon if you ran along a road with terrestrial lidar and looked at trees that overhung the footpath and the road, I reckon probably better than 20% would have a 5 centimetre dead branch or larger overhanging the road. And you think about that, how many people are dying walking along those footpaths? These falling branches can't be that significant. Otherwise, we'd have corpses everywhere. And if you go to any park, any school, any cemetery, you'll find in probability a pile somewhere of dead branches and broken branches that have come off trees that are in that sort of size category. Trees seem to shed smaller branches far more consistently than large branches. So, when the branch is only going to do $1,000, maybe, worst case might do $10,000 worth of damage. Why are we worrying about that? Because it could also just hit them and just brush off. So why are we weighing it so heavily towards even being concerned about it? Any thoughts?
Because of the risk to our integrity.
Yeah, he's told us we're worried about what happens if a branch fails. And I say, let's just start with that position. Trees are woody, perennial, shedding organisms. They're going to shed branches. That's not a question of if, that's a certainty. And therefore, we're going to expect at least some form of branch drop occasionally. Most of it's going to be dead, but occasionally it's going to be green. And that's just the nature of the beast. Small green branches being dropped means bigger green branches are being protected for whatever reason the branch has been dropped. So, okay, let's head on back over to our inbox. And where are we? Blogs. Peter sent me some images, and I'm gathering they're from someone at the City of Newcastle.
From Graham.
From Graham. Graham, we have a Lophostomen convertus.
Yes.
I'll see if I can make that image a bit bigger. No, it won't do it without opening it up. Let me see if I can open that up. No, it won't let me open it. And here, second image. Can everyone see those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here again, some more. And Graham's identified them as Nectaria fungus. I don't know whether they are or they aren't, but they are certainly easily described with the term target fungus. So this is a target canker, and there are a whole pile of these worldwide that exist. So the general position of ISA is once those get more than about 30%, they can start to affect strength of the limb. In the earlier days, it was 50%. No one gave any accounting for why we went from 50% down to 30%. There was no research to support it. So I question that. So I'm still at the 50% mark for the things that I worry about, because they're adding more wood further out. Anytime you push wood further away, it gets stronger. Now, they do fail, but you can see here, this one's probably at about 70 or 80% now. And it's great to see. And they actually use this relationship with a willow to make walking sticks and furnishings out of the timber that's been affected by the canker. And I'll see if I can find one of those for you. Willow target canker pictures.
Why is it called target canker? Is it because it's targeting the one tree or the one spot?
Target canker because it looks like a bullseye. Pull up some images for you. I definitely have images. And then I'll share one with you that is a little... so you can see how it's got that bullseye shape to it. You're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's where the term comes from.
That makes sense.
So target fungi, just the general group. And if I go, I'm going to try, let's see if I can do it. There's a whole pile of these were moved down in Adelaide a number of years ago. No, I thought it might have done it for me quickly. But they were moved because they are obviously modified by Aboriginals. And I said, no, that doesn't work that way. Now, a couple more images there. I think have I got them all, Graham? No, you can see again, all the way along. When you get this on a really fast-growing species, like Crimbia maculata, for example, very fast-growing species, you'll often get the tree trying to occlude back over, and it won't look obvious at all. So if I just go C-A-N-K-E-R, let's see if I can get a few extras up. Oh, yes. Okay. Here's the ones out of Adelaide. So I've picked them up already. So these were moved because these apparently had cultural significance. Of course, it's a fungal association. I seriously doubt that there was any cultural significance. These ones aren't. It's the same process. Those are slightly different. That's just in the outer bark. But it's the same process each time. You end up with this massive distortion in the tissue.
Mark, I've seen elephants produce artwork. Why not fungi? That's pretty amazing visually, I think.
Yeah, as I said, I was trying to find pictures of it with willow. And they use it overseas. They deliberately introduce it into the willow to use it artistically. I just can't find shots of it. But if you hunt round, you'll eventually find willow walking stick, canker walking stick. Let me try walking stick.
So how would they introduce it in the willows?
By injuring it and introducing the fungus, because we're talking about a fungal introduction. So here you are. This is it here, with the cankers on it. It's a commonly done process. Here again, a whole pile of them. Don't look like there's anything there. Sorry, I led you astray. But you can go have a hunt round for them. If you're thinking about diamond willow, that's it, diamond willow. Look at that. So that's what they call it, diamond willow. Diamond willow. Now we go search, you'll see a whole pile of it. And, you know, you can imagine something like this picture here, just being something that's delightful. Who'd agree?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I want one.
Yeah, now, that's my next point. If you do want one, make sure damn well you declare it appropriately, because I'd hate to bring in something that we don't have. I don't know what we do have, but yeah, we don't want to go bringing things in that we don't want. And Balsa Sordida is what they're using there, so it lets you know. And so they give you the Salix species, but yes, they do look good. And I said, you know, I might think about an infection at this level as being a good basis to remove a tree. I would look at something like this and saying it's getting close to 50%. Yeah, the likelihood of failure increases. Who here is a QTRA trained arborist? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still one that I start at 7 and work my way down. So it might be 6 for something that's mild, something that's getting that 50% or so might be a 5. And so you can see why if it's a low target area, it's something you can still leave. Size apart, and that's big, but if the target zone's, you know, 1 in 1,000, then we don't really need to worry about it. Graham, have you got anything else to add on that?
Yeah, well, I agree with what you said, because I've seen hundreds of them at a golf course. Not one of them had failed. So some of them were quite, you know, old. And in fact, some of the trees had just died and remained standing and died. So when you try and cut through those wounds, they're a bit like a skin wound. They don't make the tree that much more prone to failure.
Yeah, I agree. And golf courses are a great place because, particularly if you're playing golf like I play golf, all you've got to do is hit something that's infected and then re-hit, and of course you've introduced a new wound into the tree. So, you know, It doesn't take a lot, as I said, to deliberately and intentionally infect, as you've seen from that stuff on diamond willow. So,
yeah, the golf course said that they were from the golfers hitting the tree with the balls.
Yeah.
That's what they thought it was, so they weren't that worried about it.
Introduce the wound.
It's
right.
Hillsborough Golf Course at Lake Macquarie near Charlestown, if anyone plays golf or wants to go there and look at the trees.
Excellent.
So is there any wood rot with those fungi?
No, it's a pathogenic fungi. So very little loss of tissue of cellular walls, but it attacks the live cells. And it comes back out through the bark, out on the outside of the bark, in through the lenticels, attacks new tissue and starts all over again. And hard to believe, but Pholinis actually does that exact thing as well. Okay, Pholinis gives us a target that keeps on progressing. So it's a weak pathogen. Again, on some species it's quite fast, and some species it's fatal. It'll kill the host. And that, as much as anything else, is a part of the unique genetics of that particular isolate of Pholinis and that particular genetics of that one tree. So, you know, typically we say Pholinis is not an issue, watch and see. If it starts to affect tree health, the tree is going to get removed. If it's not affecting tree health, the probability is the tree is dealing with it, if it's healthy, better than we're going to do by cutting it down by a long way. Happy with that?
Yeah.
And Peter, that was the only one I got. Is that correct?
No, you should have another one.
From Andy? No,
No,
that's the last
no.
one.
Okay, so
I sent you an email as well then, Peter, a couple of days ago.
that one from you, Nils.
Yep.
I thought I'd sent that one through just today, this afternoon,
You
Mark.
might have done. Yep. Okay. Yep, you have. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
No, I hadn't got that. And another good reason to get things in quickly.
I just realised I sent it off to the group, the Arbormentor group, but I only realised today that you weren't included in that email, so I sent it to you just today. That's the reason. My bad.
I'll talk about that bottom line in a few more minutes. Development sites. Okay. The questions that you've got, Niels, must all TPZ fencing be installed before any tree work on site? The answer is no. There's no must. The standard is outlining a process. It does not give you a dictum. So, for example, why would you put a tree protection fence on when you're going to fell a tree?
As in, I mean,
how-
do you
how
have
would-
to put the protection on the trees to be retained?
Yeah,
Let's
so-
say you're removing 4 trees and you're keeping 5. Do you have to put the tree protection up on the 5 trees that are being
No.
retained?
What you've got to do is protect the trees. And so that may be done in a whole pile of different ways. For example, if I've got a house that's being demolished, the house might need to be demolished before I get the protection fence in. So then I've got to communicate to the builder and the demolishing team that they need to be standing their equipment outside of the protection area and then moving carefully. Generally, they may need to have a spotter there. So there are all sorts of things that we can do. The standard does not, the number of arborists that say the standard says you've got to do this. No, the standard says you've got to go through a process. And that process is about protecting the trees. Okay, so you don't have to have the fence up before any particular time. The fence needs to be in place to stop harm to the trees. And that may be, and I've got photographs of it, that may be a 900 mil high fence, if that's effective. That may be a paraweave fence, if that's effective, depending on what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
If we're getting close to a tree where, you know, say 7 times trunk diameter, 8 times trunk diameter away, we're going to probably need more rigid fencing. But if we're at 20 times away, does it matter? Dominic.
So I was just going to say, I think legislation is also important. So here in Canberra, we're different from everyone else for sure, but the tree protection unit will actually sometimes specify that all tree protection measures must be in place before any development work occurs, and they actually include delivery of materials at the beginning of development work. So if you follow what they say to the letter, you'll actually have all your tree protection, whether it's fencing, trunk or branch protection, whatever. Sometimes they'll specify you have to have all your tree protection in place before even materials can be delivered. So
Yeah,
I think
any condition of consent is, or they're called different things in different states, not just conditions of consent, but anything that the consent authority or the determining party imposes, you've got to comply with. So it's, for example, a court, environment court, or a district court, you've got to follow what that says. But if there's no need from the planning to necessarily do that, and it said there are times when you might want to put a fence where there's an existing garage, and that garage has got to be demolished before you can get that fence in. And so you have to think about how you're going to phase and stage works. So where do you stand when council decides to move a crossover a lot closer to a retained tree after a planning permit? The conditions of the planning permit cannot be met with the crossover in the location they want to move to. Has anyone ever heard the saying, and I'm probably going to tread on Graham's toes now, but the law is an ass? Anyone ever heard that saying? And it's really hard when you're trying to make specific laws, and that's what these conditions really are. These are someone saying, look, specifically, this is what we want you to do. have them work together perfectly. It's hard enough writing big generalized stuff. But if the driveway's in that spot, your job is to get that driveway in with the least amount of harm to the tree, or to go back and seek to have it modified. But my experience has been, it'll be interesting to see what others say, it takes a hell of a lot to harm a tree, seriously harm it. And a crossover that's 150 mils deep, and that's typically the excavation to give you a subgrade and have concrete, typically that's not going to take out a large proportion of the roots in most soils. In shallow soils, it will. Shallow soils, 300-400 mils deep. But in most soils, you know, you might take out 3 or 4 roots, and if you use the root loss calculator, you'll find that it's an amazing small portion of the root system that does get removed. In New South Wales, we have a thing called a SEP, a State Environmental Planning Policy, Transport and Infrastructure, that gives the right for a complying development to put a driveway past a tree, provided it doesn't excavate, and I think it's more than 100 mils down. Someone can look that up if you want, but it's it is non-restricted in where it's located. And so I know that these things are, driveways are going in, slabs are going in, pathways are going in these compliant developments, and trees aren't just toppling over. Trees aren't just dying. Some will, but I'm forever amazed not at how many trees topple over, but how many don't. How many trees that die, I'm amazed at how many trees don't. I see, you know, water authorities and telecommunications companies just ripping up through the street and cutting roots where you think, oh, that's not ideal. And, you know, you go back, and I've got photographs now going back 20 odd years. You go back and you look at the tree and you think, huh, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought that was going to be. I thought that was going to be a horror. And I think I've mentioned it before. Now with phones, you've got a GIS recording system on your phone when you take a photograph. I keep all that information, and I don't grow cannabis, so I'm not going to post a picture up on a blog of my cannabis plants and have the police come knocking on my door. So I don't mind having that information shared. And what that allows me to do is look at a photograph, and then I say, oh, I'm going to go have a look for that tree now and see how it's going. And I have just found that incredibly beneficial to me, forming the view that trees are a lot more tolerant than we want to give them credit for, particularly if we compensate for the harm we're doing. Rob, what would you do to compensate for the harm that you do to a tree's root when you put a driveway through and cut some roots? What would you do?
That special chemical we'd apply to it.
A special chemical, yeah. Water.
Yeah.
Just
mulch.
amazing the impact that water has on trees. It actually stimulates roots. And that shouldn't be surprising to us if we just get a bit of basil from Woolworths or Coles or IGA or wherever and put it in a vase and watch it. Or get a willow, branch off a willow and do the same thing. You know, trees want to grow roots, and water is the thing that stimulates them. Humidity. It's not saturated water, but yeah. So that's that question. So
well, in that specific case, I've written the preliminary assessment and the impact assessment, and we got the permit, and then they decided to change it before I've written the tree management plan. And so I don't know what to do now. Do I have to go back and change my whole impact assessment?
No, you're in Victoria. They'll tell you that's an issue. Yeah. They're a lot more flexible in Victoria in saying, look, we'll make the decision as to whether this can be protected, and then oddly afterwards, your job is to then say how it's protected. I
have no problems with the drive will now be 1.1 meter away from a Callistemum viminalis that's about 6 meters tall.
Don't even worry about it.
I'm not worried about the health of the tree, but the branches are going to be overhanging. Like, he's going to be scratching his car every time he drives past there. So you'll almost have to chop half the foliage off, or chop the foliage off one side. Or
Yeah.
uplifted and
You might have
stuff.
to do some pruning, and again, the consent authority has made that decision. So your job is to do the best to keep the tree alive at that point in time. Our job is not to be the consent authority, unless you're Graham, in which case, Graham, you are the consent authority, aren't you?
Well, not my role directly, but the council is, yes.
Yeah. So very different role. And so those two roles work, we often see it as working against each other. It really shouldn't be. It should be a synergistic relationship where both work together for the one desirable outcome, which is great trees, long-term retained as far as possible, and tree haters taken out the back and beaten with a baseball bat. Okay. That's
So
ideally what it
basically,
should be.
basically, I can just add into the tree management plan then that, yep, cut it or put the drive there, whatever, and you'll have to cut some foliage to put the tree protection fence up.
Yeah, and or they could temporary access from further away and then form that, because you obviously don't want big trucks and everything going past.
Yeah.
So again, you'll have to weigh that into your decision making. And what we're asked to do as arborists is to think through the process like you're doing, So we're going to have to remove some branches. Well, what happens if we want to bring a truck in there? And again, you haven't forced the driveway that way. The consent authority says that's what we want. And there'll be a reason for that. It may be proximity to a corner. It may be proximity to signage. It may be underground points, pits, all those.
Yeah, I think there was some surveying distance from something else that was 200 mil off or something, so it pushed the drive further towards the tree.
Yeah, it happens. And
Mark, can I make a comment?
yes, Peter, go ahead. Peter's going to make one.
I'd like to say that if the consent authority is deemed that this is the way things should happen, then in your report, you just note that and say that the consent authority has decided that blah, 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 and therefore this is my response to it. And that goes to what you were saying about the consent authority makes the conditions, and then you have to try and make it work the best that you can. But just be open and clear about it in your report.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I didn't even.
That's what
think
the small stuff. I mean, and I'm not talking about small size trees, but our job is not to walk on water. Our job is to bring professionalism to what we do. So if we're really good at tree protection, we should occasionally lose a tree. Because we should be trying to keep as many trees as possible and then pushing the limits. And we actually get the opposite. What we tend to do is from a precautionary point of view, remove far more trees than we need to. Or we restrict development and we say, oh no, we're not going to put 3 townhouses on that, we'll only get 2 townhouses. And then we create urban sprawl, which sees even more trees get removed. Trying to get high yields is the goal of a developer, but trying to get high yields is also a desirable outcome environmentally. So there's this balancing up. A very clever town planner worked out a number of years ago in Australia that if you had 4-story accommodation in Australia and you were to put it 1 kilometre radius from a train station, and you're to have 1/3 green space, you could fit the entire population of Australia from Sydney to Parramatta.
Well, that's all very well, but I don't know that I'd like to live there.
Oh, no. But what I'm saying in that process, you're right, Peter, is that there is an advantage to this higher yield, higher density living. It's not what I would necessarily want to live in. I remember when I was a younger lad, my father had a terrace house in the inner city area. 5-story terrace house is not exactly that's 1 room wide with a hallway and you just keep on going up and up. Not my ideal form of living either, but I think we've got to look at the fact that yield is an important thing to stop or prevent tree loss. And I know down Rob's end of the world, just as you get into North Melbourne, you just sit there, the northern suburbs of Melbourne, you sit there and think, that place isn't fit for a dog. Okay. No, you can't find a tree to cock your leg on. I mean, you know, it's just that bad. So it's a difficult process. So yes, your job, do your best to try and keep the tree in those situations. Next part of your question. The question is, what part of most likely to fail is 450 mils, but only the foliage will impact the target if it fails. If you're truly serious about that, yes, you might adjust that. You'd still do the risk calculation exactly the same. So follow the system so that anyone else auditing you can do it, and then say, however, given that the only part that's going to affect, I think it's reasonable to argue, and then argue your position. Okay.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure. That's what I sort of did, but I wasn't sure because the tree was so far away from the road. The branch was huge, but it was just
look,
only the foliage is going to hit the road. But then I wasn't sure what about cars swerving it or hitting the trunk or whatever. Or I know the foliage falling down on a car is going to do nothing, but it's all the other stuff.
Assessments do not have a brain.
Mm.
You need to use your own. Okay. And it's one of the problems I have with these small 25 mil branches, 25 mil branch. If I'm following something like QTRA, I've got 5 seconds to walk underneath the falling branch. Well, that's okay if I'm talking about a 30 centimeter falling branch, but a dead branch that's 5 centimeters in diameter, for me to get my head from there to the other side, front to the back, takes 1/10 of a second. So trying to treat a 5 centimeter dead branch the same way as we do a whole tree falling sometimes does need us to say, hang on, I think. And, Mike Ellison's done that certainly when it looks at the mass, the decreased mass application on dead branches. They weigh less. So it makes sense that there's some reduction there. So that's how I'd handle that.
Would you put like two different calculations and put them both in there? Like one for greater than 450 and one for,
No,
25 to 100.
I would say it's 450. However, it's probably, in my opinion, closer to 100 mil branch, size part 4 or size part 3. And just explain why. And again, if it's falling on a road, and I don't know the background, but if it's falling on a road, what effect does running over a 5 centimeter branch have?
Nothing.
4 tires, front end alignment, unless you're Ferrari, and again, we can't think worst case, we've got to think what's most likely. So most likely is a 100 mil branch falls on a road, I might do some vehicle damage, and yet QTRA looks at that in terms of deaths, and I just don't know how you can get it. And of course you can't.
Yeah.
And so I would explain that at that point in time is, yes, the end result's this, but this is one of those aberrant areas of any system, and systems have them. And you can do it with any system.
So you wouldn't have a problem with the risk of harm came out as 1 in 4,000 with the greater than 450 size part. Obviously that looks pretty bad.
Yeah,
when you send that, but then you'd still sort of be able to keep it if you consider that it's only the foliage that's going to touch the road.
Yeah, and that foliage isn't going to break the car. It's a possibility it could hit a motorcyclist, but what are most vehicles on the road?
Yeah, there's mostly cars and trucks on that road.
Well, on any road, they're mostly cars and trucks.
Oh, yeah, true.
The occasional motorbike, and maybe 1% of our transport. We don't say it's going to be the worst case. We say, what's it like to be on average? Well, it's going to be 1/100th of a motorcyclist and 99/100ths of a car that's got metal plates around it, that a 100 mil branch is only going to hurt you realistically when it hits you in the windscreen.
Yeah.
Okay. So and you just explain that. I don't see.
And then it's their decision anyway.
Yeah. Last one. Are there any borers that create similar galleries to polyphagous shot hole borer? Oh yeah, whole pile of them. Ambrosia beetles, weevils, There are a whole group.
From my understanding, the black stuff's the fungi.
The black
The
stuff,
outside of the holes.
yeah, may well be the fungi. So Kerkleonidae or weevils and some of the other beetles, a number of that group, in particular ambrosia beetles, have a thing called mycangia. And a mycangia is a structure on their rear that is purposely carting fungi. Okay, and if you're in Peter's end of the world, Peter Gray's end of the world, or Jeremy's, they have these funny, stupid trees called poincianas, bipinnate compound foliage, flat top, ugly as all hell, lovely flower, and they get dead branches, and when their dead branches hit the ground, they shatter. Our equivalent here is ficus. Most ficus dead branches, when they hit the ground, they shatter. And the reason they shatter is because these fungi are being introduced by weevil. The weevils create these galleries. The fungus moves through wall one very rapidly on it, and they become quite brittle. So you'll typically see a poinciana branch in Queensland or in Peter's end of the world in the northern rivers, 50 mils in diameter, hits the ground and will shatter into 10 pieces. Is that right, Peter?
Yes, it is. Pigs are a bit the same, though.
Yeah, I just said pigs are the same, polar species. And so, yeah, weevils are the group. So ambrosia are a type of weevil. There is a textbook on weevils. I think it's 3 volumes or 4 volumes. CSIRO produces it. Sell a few litres of blood and you'll get it. It's in that category. And good luck in identifying. It's a horrible, slow process. There's one that's doing Pittosporum in Sydney at the moment, yet to be identified. And, there's thousands of insects that affect trees in Australia that are in that category of yet to be identified. I think I could probably come up with a new species at least every 3 to 6 months if I put some effort into it. So it's not that hard. If you look at broader Melbourne, I'm guessing, Rob, 2,500 species of trees. Broader Sydney, 3,000. Broader Queensland, temperate to tropic, you might be getting 3,500 species of tree. Each of those with maybe 10 pests. You start to think about that. That starts to become some huge numbers. We're dealing with lots of things we still don't know. And we've seen that in our lifetime, where even native pests have become problems that we didn't expect. So the cypress weevil became a problem with cypress. We had lily-pilly leaf beetle was isolated to somewhere around about the Coffs Harbour end of the world and got spread through the nursery industry in about 2 years. Went all the way down the east coast. So we will always be struggling with these things. What do you do when you see it? You just shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, and I don't worry. Fits in that same category of I can't solve everything. But it looks great, doesn't it? For those of you who didn't get to see it, I'll zoom it up.
Pretty neat. So there's weevils that chew on the foliage as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's different
So
kinds.
there are weevils that eat foliages, weevils that eat fruit, weevils that eat flower. Grain-eating weevils are a big problem in stored grains. So yeah, there's plenty of diversity out there.
There you go.
What you need to find those things is you need to cut a branch off, you need to put it in a closed tank, and you need to watch for the emergent insect. And that's just a hit and miss process. I think we had Jason Paxton on a few meetings ago, and he was talking about the sawfly larvae. Well, he never cultured them on, so we still don't know what species of sawfly that was, and we may never know. That's just the nature of it. It takes work to find these things, and I encourage you, when it comes to insects, because they're big. I mean, some of them are only 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters in size, but that's sizable compared with fungi. Learning to grow them on and observing is really beneficial. You learn so much by that process, because a whole part of this stuff is not in textbooks. I'll give you a good example. Pittosporum longicorn is a species of longicorn that attacks a pittosporum, particularly variegated pittosporum, and causes it to often break bits off. And you'll see that typically in our urban areas, variegated pittosporum with, dead pieces broken off. But it's a polyphagous borer. Polyphagous means many eating. So it eats many different things. It eats melia, it eats ash, it eats ulmus. So understanding that is important. And how do you find that out? Well, you've got to get a grub out of an ash and grow it on. You've got to get a grub out of a melia and grow it on. So, if I see something like that, I grab it. Pretty easy to grow a borer in a branch on. You just wrap it in cling wrap and put it in a sealed container. You're wrapping in cling wrap to try and stop dehydration. And it'll chew its way through the cling wrap when the time comes. And that's how you get that information. So I'd encourage you to do it. It's great if you've got kids or grandkids, because they'll see all sorts of things they've never seen before.
Mark, can I make a comment?
Yes, Peter.
I would encourage everyone to try to undertake some original research, such as you've just described, whether it's insects or whatever it is that catches your interest, because it produces enormous benefits, not only because you're adding to the knowledge out there, but also for your own personal development. Speaking from my own experience, I've done a couple of projects, and it's been, even though it was arduous and expensive and difficult while I was trying to do other things at the time, but looking back, it's some of the best things that I've done in my career is to undertake that sort of work.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Peter. And even the simple things like I see a larvae and I want to know what it is, really is a simple process. 50% of the time they die. Every now and again something pops out and I think, that's not what I expected. And I learn. Dominic, you got a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a question with what you were saying about when you come across pests on a tree, and you're talking about growing it on. Do you mean where there's a little branch with an active pest, cut it off and wrap it in cling wrap so you can observe how it progresses?
So what I'm saying is, if you've got an adult, it's not so bad. So if you've got an adult beetle, even an adult hemiptera, pretty easy to go through the identifying process, is a little easier. But there's not really good keys to larvae. So, for example, you've got a tree that's being chewed by a caterpillar, and it's being heavily damaged, and it will happen at some stage in your life. It's happened a number of occasions in mine. You don't know what that adult caterpillar is. One that affects Graham's end of the world, not so much Peter's, but Sydney side, we have one that does Glaucidium. Well, we need to know something about that caterpillar. What we want to know is what it turns into. Does it turn into a moth or a butterfly? And what's the role of that moth or butterfly ecologically? And it just so happens, as far as I can figure at this stage, and again, I've got to get more grubs or more caterpillars to grow on again, is the best I can figure out, it turns into a moth that is important for pollination. So there's a good side and the bad side, and we need to go through that process. So
my question was a little bit more about what that process is. I didn't quite follow when you were talking about using a sample and growing it on.
So larvae we can usually identify, and somewhere I do have a paper that I wrote on it. You can usually identify them by physical characteristics. So if you've got a larvae, trying to identify the genus or the species, in most cases, probably 99% of the cases, you're lost. You've not got any hope. So you need to get it to adult stage. So if it's caterpillar, it's putting them in a small little tank, breeder tank, plastic tank, glass jar with a few little holes in the lid, whatever you need, shoebox, and then feeding them regularly. On a borer, it's cutting a length of the stem off. Often you'll find the larvae or the pupae inside. Pupae stage is pretty easy. You just wrap it. It'll deal with it. If it's still chewing, you want to try and keep it, the branch alive so it doesn't dehydrate. So one stem into some moisture or oasis, forestry oasis, and again back into a tank. The reason why I get things into a tank or some sealed container is you want to be able to see what they come to when they come out the other end. And those of them that have been in class with me have probably seen them, but let me see if I can find some examples. Pittosporum. I spelled, yeah. Okay, this one was fairly easy to identify because we've got the adult beetle there. This is Pittosporum leaf beetle. But what would you do if you just saw the grub? The answer, the grub looks completely different than the larvae. And so you do need to know something about what we've got and how. So this one is a seed feeding hemiptera. This one's acacia feeding. Okay, what's this going to turn into? Anyone want to guess?
Wouldn't have a clue.
It's going to turn into a beetle. That's all I can tell you. But we need to know what sort of beetle. And the way to do that is we're going to put it into a container and then try and nurture it along until it reaches adulthood. You know, this would be in the right condition if I hadn't destroyed everything. That's a pupae form of a beetle, and growing that on would be an ideal thing because it'll allow us to identify the species. And, you know, a lot of that. Okay, so here's one that's come out. This is one that's come out of a container. You can see it's in just a Chinese food container. I've grown that one out from my collection. That's Pittosporum longicorn, for those of you who don't know. So I rushed through that and I shouldn't have. 6 dots on the back of the thorax here, and then 1 dot either side on the elytra and 1 dot at the back that makes this lovely shape. So very distinct longicorn, and it said polyphagous. So that was bred from a pupae stage or larvae stage. You know, this is fig leaf beetle, and there's the adult beetle. So having that information helps me identify what I'm dealing with. Larvae, for example, Buprestidae, very hard to identify. The workings give you a hint. Here's 2 together. This is a longicorn gallery, and this is a jewel beetle gallery, the 2 together. The present shape markings make that a jewel beetle gallery. So typical of them. But yeah, you want to know what things are. So trying to get things to adulthood is the name of the game. And every now and again, you'll get everything there because you'll have eggs, adult, you know, different instars. But that's the rarity. Typically, what we often get is just an insect. And I remember when the first time I ever caught Propsis beetle, I had no idea. I thought, oh, they must be sawflies because they've got that sort of arching back that you get from sawflies. But I got a beetle instead by doing it, and that helps reinforce that knowledge from your side. So still to this day, I will grow things on when I can. I do get into trouble for it. I think Peter may recall I have a desk that the scanning electron microscope sits on now that we had a cossid wood moth chew right through the desk because I put a log with the cossid wood moth on top, and it went through the bottom and made a nice perfectly round hole through the the top, but you learn, and that's an important part of the process. So anytime you don't have the adult form, trying to get the adult form is ideal. Do you always get it? No, you don't always get it, but you've got to at least give it a good go.
What's the longest you've had to wait for the adult to emerge?
Well, I at one stage I was breeding quite successfully Agrinomys spinocollis. I had a really good production of them going, which is the Ponciana longicorn, Decay longicorn, Banksia longicorn, call it whatever you want. And they're 12 months to 2 years in cycle. And I learned a whole pile of things by breeding them. I learned a lot about what they do, what they don't do, how well they survive. It's useful information. And so here's some from breeding. This is Ponciana longicorn. You see how it's still very fattened in the abdomen, and how the elytra is not all hardened off and not heavy and chitin. That's because it's just been taken out of the breeding chamber. And they actually change colors again. It's a fascinating process to watch. I just can't help say to you, do it, learn, and grow in information. It's definitely worth every bit of it. Same when you're out there. If you see it on a tree, photograph it. You may not identify it, but at least you've got the photograph for later on, and you can go back to it and have a look. Just a great process, and every now and again you come across some amazing things. It's help you, Dominic. It's not a perfect process, but it works.
So yeah, it does. Thank you. That hadn't actually ever occurred to me to take a sample home and grow it.
Yeah. Now, make one comment on that. Taking samples home and growing, just be aware that some things you don't want to take home and grow. So at the moment, you don't want to bring larvae home from poplars and things like that in Perth, because it's probably going to be not so good in the end for you. So understand that you may need to do a quarantining of the process in the end.
Yes, certainly.
But,
that?
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I haven't really come across any. I don't think I've actually come across an active pest yet. It always, I'm always there, seeing the aftermath. But I don't know if I've actually come across a tree where the pest is there on the tree when I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and so you will start to see that more often. You'll start to see it, oddly enough, not just from when you're being asked to by a client, but when you're just plain looking. And I know that when I was running classes, we'd go out and deliberately look for pests, and that pest is an unfair word. Look for insects or arthropods that feed upon plant material, and they're really quite common. Amazingly common. In fact, if you get a fogging machine and you lay down sheets underneath a tree and you spray pyrethrum fogging up through the canopy, you'll be amazed at how many hundreds of species of insects you'll find in something like a eucalypt.
What fog?
Pyrethrum. Don't go doing it.
No, I didn't quite catch it.
Pyrethrum. So you just poison them. But I'll give you.
Right.
This is a tree. This is a Crimbia maculata. When the temperature gets to above about 41 or 42, the insects have to protect themselves. And these are insects and arthropods of all different sorts. Look at what I've got in the tree. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're just one spot. We'll go. There's probably 50 shots in this. A wasp, cockroach, ladybird, another one. Don't know what this is here. Another roach. A couple of beetles, a couple of ladybirds, a small little spider here. The amount of things that came down and sought shade, leafhopper. These are all things from one tree seeking shelter on a really hot day. and I'm guessing there's probably 50 or 60 different species that I just shot on the trunk, and their temperatures were high enough that it stopped the insects from wanting to move. So they were really good to photograph. And those of you who don't know it, this one's really horror. Red-shouldered beetle, or plague beetle, and particularly, again, those in Queensland and northern New South Wales. But they come all the way down to Sydney, and they do a really nasty job on a whole pile of trees. But yes, you can see as I go up, you know, the number of things that were on the one tree and the number of predatory things that were beside non-predatory things, again, was pretty interesting. But yeah, that's one of the ways I've learned about insects. The other thing is, of course, just taking the photographs and building up your collection. And you can go to Ladybirds of Australia and you can identify that if that's what you want. Now, I know some things about it. I may not find anything for ages. This is one of those research projects that Peter talked about. This is a unusual little insect that feeds on Allocasuarina. And I learned a whole pile of things about how this gall-forming insect works, and redefine some of the understanding on that just by playing with them. So I just can't help but encourage that as a great process. And, you know, don't try this one. This is orange bronze bug. It stinks. But just letting a kid see that something like this can go from that to that is just amazing.
Wow.
You know, that's the nymph form. I know what it is because I'm so used to it. That's the adult form. They don't look similar. Happy with that?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate all that.
Guys, we've been at it for an hour and a half. We're there. Peter, we're not doing one at Christmas time, is that right? You there, Peter? Hello, Peter. I think Peter's disappeared. I'll leave it up.
Sorry, sorry, I was just mute. I'm happy to let the Christmas session drift.
I think it was the 23rd, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's 23rd.
But so then we have to think about, well, when's the next one? That would be January. That would be the second Tuesday in January.
Which is the 14th.